It's really a pleasure to be here at IDCC. It's one of the conferences that I look forward to coming to every single year, to meet old friends, but to hear just incredibly innovative ideas and inspiring talks like we've heard this morning, but also really practical solutions. What I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit of changes that we've had to make over the last several years to building our services and building communities to support data-intensive research. A little bit about the California Digital Library is we serve the University of California community, for those who aren't familiar with the CDL as we call it, and 10 campuses of the UC. There's over 360,000 students, faculty, and staff, hundreds of museums and art galleries, medical centers, law schools, and 3 national labs. So it's a pretty big organization. It has a pretty healthy bureaucracy behind it as well, I might add. The CDL supports the research lifecycle, and we do that through our programs, through our collections programs that license journals, our digital special collections, discovery and delivery, the publishing group, and then the UC Curation group that I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about today. This is the CDL. There's no ivy crawling up the walls of the California Digital Library. There's no faculty and staff running up and down the hallways. It's cubicles. We pretty much all have headsets on or wear headsets all day and meet remotely with people. We're about 75 to 80 people who work at the CDL. And we are a mix of developers and project managers and administrators. If I take a look at our environment when the Digital Preservation Program was founded in 2002, we really focused on preservation, and preservation predominantly for memory organizations within the University of California. And as a byproduct of that, the content we dealt with mostly was museum and library content, images and texts and things that were really coming out of the library or legacy library collections that were being digitized. Our infrastructure was largely static. It was more of a build it and they will come type of delivery of infrastructure. Our services were hosted. Sustainability, you know, the good old days of we didn't have to care about our costs like we do now. We didn't have to think about how we're going to sustain our services for the long run like we do now. The landscape has changed tremendously over the past several years, and everybody in this room is aware of the changing landscape. It's the diversity of content, and along with that becomes diversity of what users want to do with that content. They want to have big data on their little phone, and with that decreasing resources, and again, I'm sure everybody in this room has felt the pinch of budgets and smaller staff, etc. And so those have had a real impact on what we've been able to do, and along with the inevitability of disruptive change through technology. And that's also impacted institutional missions. Is this really a key piece that institutions want to do? The University of California, just one other piece about who we are. The UC mission is teaching, learning, and research. But the U.S., the University of California, performs about 1/12 of all academic research and development in the United States. That's a huge number, and so that's something that we feel very much at the University of California, that it's predominantly a research institution. So if you think about research and the University of California and what we were doing as libraries of worrying about preserving special collections and things like that, our researchers were worried about something very, very different. They were worried about how to fulfill a data management plan that agencies were now saying were needed. They needed a place to put their data. They didn't want to think about preservation. They wanted to share their research with others. They wanted to get credit for that research, and on and on and on. We were asking them to think about metadata before they deposited their data in our repositories. They had no idea what metadata was. Many couldn't even, had a hard time naming their files. So for us, we had to think differently, and we've done that in a number of ways. Rather than focus just on preservation, we focus on curation and that whole curation life cycle. And I look to a lot of what the DCC has done over the years for inspiration in that area. And previously we were building for memory organizations, and we've really had to switch to thinking about not just memory organizations, but data producers. Instead of a static infrastructure, we really needed to think about applications enabling diverse use, and I'll get into this a little bit more. Services no longer hosted, but we partner, it's self-service, etc. Museum content is still important to us, but we also think about research content and web content. And we also, unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm happy to say, we think about cost models very much. So this has forced us to pivot and work differently, and here's just a handful of bullet points that I think is helpful to that conversation. First is to engage with the research community early in the life cycle, so move far as upstream as possible about when data are being produced. And this is what we, in thinking through our services for research data, these are some of the things that we thought about. The second thing is prioritize the use of scarce resources to support emerging initiatives. We knew that we needed to be nimble and we needed to act differently. So instead of building big solutions, we start small and provide simple solutions that can build up to answer a more complex problem. And deploy simple and flexible infrastructure and services that can be used in diverse ways. And finally, develop partnerships and collaborate now more than ever. It's not just the library that has a solution, it's not just the data center, it's not just the museum, it's the collective village. So out of that soul searching and beer drinking was, oh, did I say that? 5 services began to emerge to meet the diverse needs of our community. And those 5 services support the whole research life cycle. And first is planning your research through the data management planning tool, creating your data through the Data Up tool, Easy ID to identify it and cite your data, having a place to put your data in the Merit repository, and finally the web archiving service that allows you to build collections of those data. So the first thing I want to talk about is the DMP tool, and again, IDCC, some of us came together at a very cold Chicago IDCC meeting and kind of cooked this idea up. Andrew Salins from UVA and Sarah Shreves and my DataOne colleagues. And so what the DMP tool does is connects researchers to resources to create a data management plan. It's not anything that fancy, but it just brings together all the information that the researcher needs to know in order to submit that quality data management plan to NSF, NIH, NEH, or another funding agency. It's customizable, so somebody can make it, add information about their institution. Primary functions are a step-by-step wizard with templates and examples, links to institutional resources, etc. The usage of the DMP tool, I see there's a typo up there, has just been phenomenal. We launched in October 2011, and we have over 3,000 users using the tool, creating about 2,700 plans from about 550 institutions. I'm sorry for the very text-heavy nature of this slide, but we just received funding from the Sloan Foundation to further develop the DMP tool, and we're starting right now. We're meeting actually at this conference, and the partners are UC3, the UVA library, UIUC library. DataOne is also going to help us think about some of these issues from the scientist perspective. But really, the first tool was a lot of by-hand processes, and we want to automate those and make it easier for users to shape and exploit the DMP tool to meet their local needs, to do some data mining of the tool. Were my researchers successful? What directorates are they applying to? So you can really then shape your data management program. We also want to provide support for that full data management lifecycle. And engage with the open source community of users so we can sustain that going forward. The second service I want to talk about is something called DataOne. So now somebody has created a data management plan. They have submitted it to a funding agency. They received a big check in the mail, and now they have to do the research and begin collecting the data if they haven't already. And this is where DataOne comes in. And it's a tool that allows researchers to create, share, archive, connect, publish tabular data. And this came from funding from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation along with Microsoft Research. This is one of Lee Dirk's babies. And there's primary functions are an Excel add-in and as well as a cloud application. And it walks the user through creating metadata, checking for good data management practices as that spreadsheet is created. You obtain an identifier for persistent citation, and then archive and share that data with others. The third service I want to talk about is EasyID. We feel that citation is the centerpiece of data sharing. Citation says, this is mine, that is yours, and everybody gets credit and everybody is happy. The EasyID service allows users to create identifiers, ARCs and DOIs for anything, whether it's digital or print. Also create the accompanying metadata and persistent citation links. The DOIs come from DataCite, and then the data are made discoverable via Primo or the Web of Science or Scopus or something like, and we also expose data to Google. This is a really exciting service for us. Simply because it's very simple and tangible and people can use it in diverse ways. Researchers can obtain an identifier and control their research and get credit. And we also have a cost model in place for this, and we're very pleased at the success of EasyID. We have a range of customers from the for-profit sector to the nonprofit sector to a range of academic institutions. The next service is Merit. So you've identified your work, you've created a citation for it, now you need a place to put it, and that's where Merit Repository comes in. Nothing fancy. It allows users to deposit, manage, access, share, and preserve their content. And it's discipline and content agnostic. But what I think is a little fancy about it is that it's pretty simple. The architecture allows for an incredible amount of diversity, which I'll tell you about in a minute. People can use Merit in a variety of ways. It can be a dark archive. If people just want a place to put something that they don't want it to see the light of day. It can be a bright archive with direct discovery and analysis. It can be a preservation backend. If an institution already has a solution for exposing their data, but they don't want to have a preservation repository, they can move their content to our preservation repository. It can also be integrated with data grids, like DataOne. So an example of a preservation backend is Research Hub. This is at UC Berkeley. This is their research data management system. Everybody at UC Berkeley gets a piece of Research Hub, an account and a login, and they can manage their data, etc. And then they can say, this is really important, I want to preserve it, and then they get an identifier, and then it can be made available. Another thing of a use of Merit is DataShare. It's a bright archive for direct discovery of biomedical research data. This is in collaboration with the University of San Francisco, and there's a data sharing champion at UCSF by the name of Mike Weiner. He's a neuroscientist. Oh, something went fast. He's a neuroscientist, and he really believes in data sharing, and so he's the brainchild behind this. And The good thing about this is that UCSF can maintain their branding while exploiting our architecture and using the Merit repository. Finally, Merit is also part of the DataOne infrastructure as part of the data grid. DataOne is funded by NSF, and it's a federated framework for sustainable cyber infrastructure for innovative data-intensive research on climate change. And it's really many parts of DataOne. There's a toolkit, global replication, as well as discovery and education modules. And so one thing that I want to talk about is something called OneShare, and this is a little bit complicated, and I'm hoping I can explain it in such a way that it's understandable. So you see the Merit repository sits at the California Digital Library, but there is a storage application of the Merit repository. DataUp is the tool that allows people to deposit tabular data, and DataOne is an infrastructure for environmental data. So DataOne and UC3 got together and we said, we want to create something like SlideShare except for tabular data, where anyone, anywhere can deposit data, and that's what OneShare is bringing these three things together into the OneShare repository. And so this allows people like Dryad, who create a tremendous amount of tabular data, to easily use the DataUp tool. eBird, who are the citizen science community, who could very much benefit from a tool like DataShare, like DataUp, can use this, USGS, BigShare, etc. Final service is the web archiving service, and we've been archiving web content for a very long time. And I think for supporting research data, there's a lot of uses for web archiving. And Adam, I think, pointed out some very nice examples. The web archiving service essentially lets you capture, manage, preserve, and then publish or make available your web collections. And so it's really a very easy tool for our researchers to use. Finally, cost modeling. We have two different flavors of cost modeling. Researchers can pay as you go or paid up pricing. If a researcher says, I know I'm going to collect X amount of data for my project, we can give them a price so they can write that price into their grant, etc. And so we've just started to work on that. I'm afraid I'm out of time, but here's again some of the things that we think are important is to how we're working differently of building community, being entrepreneurial, and developing sustainable solutions, which enable applications to be used in a very diverse ways. So thank you very much, and that's our building again.